I'm
While she
trying. Hold
turns
on 1 second.
while she turns her camera on, I'm very excited to introduce Tara Tyler, a good friend of mine who's a psychiatrist and an addiction psychiatrist. He does probably 70% of his work straight psychiatry, and another third is substance use disorders and other process disorders. I asked him if he had any ideas for novel presentations, and his wife, who is getting I believe, a PhD in dietetics, would it be called, Tara?
Yep.
So she couldn't stop talking about Tara Tyler, and then I learned that Tara Tyler not only works with people with acute serious medical disorders, but she also has worked in fields of mental health and substance use, trying to find ways that food, nutrition affects substance use. Everybody knows it's, so I started talking to Tara, and it's clear we all know food's the energy source. It's good for energy, and too much caffeine makes you crazy, like I feel right now, stressed out on this thing. And too much sugar makes you like I feel right now. But what Tara explained to me was mood's really closely related, and mental clarity is closely related. And when I referred someone to the addiction psychiatrist who referred me to Tara, he sent that person back to our home. It's a family member, and called and said, first thing you need to do is get that diet in order. Get the diet in order. I said, oh, is that all? No, there's a lot of other stuff I have to treat, but it's the diet that we need to address as well. So I'm just thrilled to have Tara here. She's a registered dietitian, licensed dietitian, nutritionist, certified diabetes care and education specialist. And she had me, like that movie, you had me at hello, when she said, well, food should nourish your body, food should taste good, and everybody's needs are as unique as the individual. So it's just, with no more, I will turn it over to Tara Tyler, but I'm very excited to see the presentation, and thank you very much, Tara.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So you should be able to see it now, hopefully.
All good.
Okay, perfect. So now that I have my slides up, I can't see anything else that's going on. So feel free to interrupt me as needed. But good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with everyone today. As John mentioned, my name is Tara Tyler. I am a registered and licensed dietitian and a certified diabetes care and education specialist. Those are my credentials. I currently work full-time as a diabetes educator for Novo Nordisk, and Novo Nordisk is a global healthcare company out of Denmark and the leading manufacturer of insulin in the world. So as a diabetes educator for them, I support our customers as they navigate the ever-changing world of diabetes and chronic disease management. In addition, I run a private practice, a nutrition consultation practice where I offer corporate consultations as well as personal nutrition counseling to address a large variety of nutrition and wellness related concerns. So it's in this capacity that I'm joining you today, and I am really excited to be here. I'm hopeful that the information that I have brought you will find useful. So let's get started. Let's see. My slides aren't advancing. Hold on 1 second. Okay, here we go. So we are going to try to answer a few questions today, namely, what should lawyers eat? Or really, what should any of us eat? And the truth is, it depends on so many different variables that there's just no way I could cover it all in one presentation. So I've chosen to focus in a little bit on stress and nutrition during our time together today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about stress and its impact on health, and we'll cover some basic nutrition principles to get you started. While we're at it, I'm going to try to shed some light on some common nutrition myths that you've probably heard. I imagine a career in the legal profession to be pretty stressful. I envision long hours and strict timelines and probably lots of deadlines, maybe intense competition, and all of that on top of whatever else is going on in your personal life. Maybe you're trying to nurture your career while you raise a family and simultaneously are caring for an aging parent. Any one of these things would be stressful, but many of us are balancing more than one of them at a time. And that doesn't even include any efforts to exercise or stay active or maintain a social life or just completing all of those mundane daily tasks that life requires. So it's impossible to eliminate stress. So what do we do about it? It's well documented that stress can have a profound impact on health as well as our ability to perform both physically and mentally. So I hope by exploring a bit around the questions, how is stress impacting me and what are those potential health implications? And does nutrition really matter outside of my weight status? And by introducing some concepts around intuitive eating and mindful eating practices, that you'll be able to gather up some tools that will help you fuel your success as you move forward. So I want to start by talking a little bit about stress. Stress can be a lot of different things. It can be physical or emotional. It can be short-lived or ongoing. And stress can be related to events both real and imagined. And I did say imagined. Have you ever ruminated over the potential of an outcome or worried about an event that might happen? I know I certainly have. And the truth is that our body responds the same to our imagination as it does to our reality. Stress at its core is simply a series of responses and adaptations that can come in physical or emotional forms and stem from confrontation with actual or perceived threats to our well-being. Again, either our physical or emotional well-being. So stress is a state of physical, mental, or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances. Physical stress might be something like a broken bone or an illness, or even a really strenuous workout. Acute stress, as its name suggests, is short-lived. I use the acronym NUTS when I'm talking about acute stress because it results from something specific that involves novelty, unpredictability, threat to the ego, and generally leaves us with a poor sense of control. Excuse me. So an example of this would be like almost getting into a car accident or giving a presentation like this one. We've all experienced the symptoms of acute stress, that sort of quickening of the heart rate or an increase in respiration or that feeling of nervousness or butterflies that we get in our bellies. The symptoms of chronic stress are often a little bit more subtle and certainly more detrimental to our health. Symptoms of chronic stress at its worst manifest as things like anxiety and depression, and even physical health problems. So for this reason, chronic or long-term stress is usually what we're more concerned with when we think about the physiological and biomedical impacts. It results from repeated exposure to stressful situations, perhaps a situation that is ongoing or unresolved, or a situation that continued for many, many years before being resolved. Things like past trauma or demanding responsibilities stemming from our professional or personal lives. Being in a stressful environment for long periods of time can impact us even if we don't feel stressed. And in fact, most of us become accustomed to some level of stress in our lives, and we develop coping mechanisms to help us get through the day, which makes those subtle symptoms even more difficult to identify. And many of the symptoms of chronic stress, like increased systemic inflammation or disruptions in our hormone production, are almost imperceptible to us without the proper blood tests. So we don't have to feel anxious or sad to be stressed. And symptoms like fatigue or moodiness or GI symptoms can often be explained away. Like, I had pizza for lunch, so that's why I have indigestion. Or I stayed up late several nights last week because the baby was sick, so that's why I'm feeling tired. When in fact, there may be underlying stress-related things that are causing those symptoms. So it's important to keep in mind that even situations that we consider positive can create a stress response in our bodies. So think about things like wedding planning or expecting a child. We generally think of these as positive, but that doesn't mean they're not stressful. So this is a chart that kind of shows what stress can do to performance. As I've already mentioned, it can have a really profound impact on not only our health, but how we perform in our work or our studies. And it's important to note that the effects are not always negative. There is, in fact, this optimal level of stress, at least in terms of performance, where we perform at our peak. So the difficulty lies not in finding that balance or that sweet spot, but in maintaining it. And that in and of itself can be stressful. My personal experience with life is that there is no true balance. We're constantly making decisions about where to spend our time and energy and managing priorities and values that are constantly shifting. So, and we can't perform at peak all the time, right? We have to have downtime and we have to have relaxation time. So we tend to sort of ride this curve a little bit like a wave. At least I do. I'm bored, so I overpack my calendar. Now I'm stressed out, I'm tired, I'm anxious. And I offload my calendar and now I'm bored again. And so, somewhere in the middle, I'm hitting peak performance. Incorporating healthy nutrition practices when we're performing optimally not only helps us maintain that optimal performance for longer, it will help ensure that we have reserves for times when we might be teetering a little bit. As I previously mentioned, even things that we perceive as positive can sometimes induce a stress response from our bodies. For me, I always talk about the emotions of excitement and anxiety. They feel very similar to me. I almost don't like to be excited because it reminds me so much of anxiety. And that's because, from a biological perspective, what's happening inside our bodies is very much the same. So, there are a variety of biomedical stress markers and physical symptoms of stress. And we've already kind of discussed some of those: that increased heart rate, increased respiration, increased body temperature, like you get those stress sweats, dilated pupils, GI symptoms like changes in appetite, things like muscle tension or headaches. These are all pretty common. Biomedical markers like cortisol, also known as the stress hormone, or C-reactive protein, which is an inflammation marker, can give us insights into potential health disruptions. And if we think of nutrition through the perspective of biology or biochemistry, it's really pretty simple. All we have to do is ensure that we're getting enough of the nutrients to counteract these stress-related responses in our bodies, like cell oxidation, which happens on a daily basis. Nutrients that promote balance in our blood sugar and our hormones and strengthen our immune system. Nutrients that fuel our muscles and our brain and promote efficient function of our central nervous system, all while facilitating a healthy gut biome and a stable, healthy weight status. So easy breezy, right? I oftentimes think that nutrition and health information that we receive is kind of overcomplicated, especially in the media. And it's really confusing, in part because nutrition is a relatively young science and what we know about it is constantly evolving. So that means there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of contradicting information out there. You've heard eggs are good. No, eggs are bad. Wait, are they good or are they bad? High fat is good. No, low fat is better. Include dairy in your diet. Eliminate dairy from your diet. It's hard to keep it all straight. And the diet industry, keep in mind, is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So there's a lot of money to be made out there selling people a quick fix or, some information that may or may not be accurate. People are willing to pay for it because they're desperate for it. So I say that to encourage you to consider where your information is coming from when you're out in the world sort of consuming all of this. I think it's important to think about why we eat. Obviously, we eat to sustain our life. We need energy to function, right? But we also eat for a lot of other reasons, many of which have absolutely nothing to do with nutrition. A big one is we eat for comfort. John mentioned that I worked as a clinical dietitian. I was at the VA in Tampa for a long time. And during my tenure there, I worked with a group of psychologists who ran a program for veterans in recovery from substance use disorder. So one day, a group of these psychologists came to me and they said, Tara, we have a big problem. The veterans are going through this program and they're doing great with their recovery, but they're all gaining a ton of weight and it's really hurting the hospital's metrics. One reason for this is that certain foods, specifically foods that are high in fat, sugar, and salt, I call that the nutrition comfort trifecta, when they're eaten in combination, they impact the same pleasure centers of the brain that drugs and alcohol do. So essentially, these veterans were substituting drugs and alcohol with Snickers bars and potato chips because eating these foods feels calming and comforting in the short term. We also eat for control. Disordered eating would be an extreme example of this, but many people eat to control their body size or their body composition. And many people use food to gain some sense of control in their lives when they feel out of control in other areas. And you see this a lot in people with chronic diseases like celiac or diabetes, where food is a big part of their disease management. We also eat for social and cultural reasons, and we eat for pleasure. And I actually think that these last three are super important and often overlooked when we think about nutrition for health. I believe that eating should be a sensual and pleasurable experience, and I believe it can be and also be healthy. That's kind of where this concept of intuitive eating comes in. Intuitive eating is an anti-diet model that's rooted in the body positive movement that started a decade or more ago. And I didn't make it up. It was developed and researched by two dietitians who had been working in the field of disordered eating for a lot of years. Intuitive eating is about getting back in touch with your body, listening to its signals, and allowing that to inform your food choices, paying attention to the messages of the body in a way that honors both physical and mental health. These dietitians have written several books on the subject, and in these books, they describe the balance between what they call inner attunement and external health values. So, inner attunement is the signals and messages that our body sends us in an attempt to get what it needs. Oftentimes, and for really good reasons, we misinterpret these signals, and that ends up creating a sort of loop of cravings and unhealthy choices. This is particularly difficult when we're living in a state of chronic stress because stress can impact and skew these signals that we're getting from our body. Hunger and cravings are a really good example of this. Hunger and cravings are very different, and that's a talk in and of itself. But when we're in a state of chronic stress, our stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline are elevated, and our calming hormones like serotonin and dopamine are suppressed. So this definitely can impact hunger signals. Some people will get more hungry, some people will get less hungry. But to make it even more complicated, the brain, in an attempt to increase these feel-good hormones like serotonin and dopamine, will send signals to our body, we often call them cravings, to help boost those positive feelings. So it can take a good deal of focus and practice to learn how to correctly read our body's signals more accurately. And in some cases, after long periods of chronic stress and long periods of habitual eating, we all tend to come into habits around food. We sometimes have to sort of retrain our bodies to signal us more appropriately. External health values are things like your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your weight status. And there are healthy parameters for all of these medically relevant measures. And as you've probably heard, diet and exercise often play a big role. Oftentimes, though, people are going to varying extremes to control these external health values. And oftentimes they do so in direct opposition to the wisdom of their body or their inner attunement. So more often than not, this results in diet cycling, or in worst case scenarios, people just give up on trying to improve their health because they're confused, they're overwhelmed, and they're tired of trying things that just don't work. So intuitive eating suggests that when we find this overlap between honoring our inner attunement and our external health values, we find what the authors call authentic health. Now, authentic health doesn't mean that you've reached your high school weight or that you can stop taking your cholesterol medication. It doesn't mean that all your health problems are solved. It simply means that you're eating in a way that allows you to feel good, both physically and emotionally. Intuitive eating is based on 10 guiding principles, and I'm not going to get into those today for the purposes of our time, but they're centered around honoring hunger and satiety signals while finding enjoyment and pleasure in your food and eating in a way that promotes health and wellness. Mindfulness is about focusing in on the present moment, calmly and without judgment, acknowledging and accepting the feelings and thoughts and bodily sensations that you're having in any given moment. Mindful eating is a way of enjoying food with awareness, attention, and appreciation. And it's inspired by all the Buddhist mindfulness practices. Usually, the average person is eating pretty mindlessly. If we're multitasking, we are not giving our full attention to either task. For example, I ate my dinner one night last week while I was putting together the slides for this presentation. And when I was finished eating, even though I wasn't physically hungry anymore, I felt completely unsatisfied. I barely remembered eating. I could not tell you if the food tasted good or not. I honestly don't even remember what it was I ate. So, mindful eating is a tool that can help us become more aware of our body's signals and how what we eat makes us feel. It can lead to greater satisfaction with food and smaller portions without really trying. It is completely unreasonable to have an expectation that every time you eat something, you're going to do it mindfully. Sometimes we just have to fuel our body so we can complete the task at hand. But taking opportunities to practice mindful eating throughout the week will make it feel a little more simple and a little more natural. The practice of mindful eating can be done with absolutely any food or beverage, regardless of the nutritional value of that item. So the best way to start is when you have some downtime and can spend a few minutes really focusing. It's helpful to avoid being too hungry when you begin a mindful eating practice. And you should start with something small that you can eat in a relatively short period of time versus trying to eat an entire meal like this. The goal is to use as many of your five senses as possible, noticing not just what you're eating, but the flavors, the textures, the temperatures, and the aromas of what you're eating. Even the sounds that you hear as you eat, whether that's opening a package or removing a wrapper, or the noises that happen inside your head when you chew. Taking small bites and chewing longer than feels normal is really helpful, and it will allow you to explore how the flavors and the textures of the food change. An example of a mindful food practice that we are probably all familiar with is a wine tasting. When you taste a wine, you don't just pick up your glass and throw it back, right? You start by looking at it. You swirl it around in the glass and you notice the colors and the viscosity. And then you smell it and you pay attention to the subtleties and the aroma. And when you get to the actual tasting part, you don't swallow it right away. You kind of hold the wine in your mouth for a moment to give yourself time to identify the different layers of flavor. This is essentially an act of mindful eating, and it can be done similarly with any other food or beverage. So you're probably thinking at this point, okay, it's all great and good, Tara, but you've shown us like 10 slides and you haven't said anything about food or diet or what we're supposed to eat. So we'll get into it, I promise. As I mentioned, I think this part gets largely overcomplicated. So I just want to go over some basic guiding principles. You may find that these are things you've already heard before. I often notice when I'm working with a new client that they already know what kind of changes they could make to improve the nutritional quality of their diet. But I think as humans, we all tend to kind of hyper focus on one particular aspect, hoping that that one thing will fix everything. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's just not how nutrition or even health works. There is no such thing as a perfect diet, and there is no one way of eating that is going to ensure you get back to the weight you were in high school, or that you're going to fix your high blood sugar or blood pressure with, or blood sugar for that matter. My guess is if I showed you each two plates, you could identify the healthier one. So it's not always about knowledge either. It's certainly not about making perfect choices, but it is about making consistent choices. So the first basic nutrition principle that I have for you is to eat more real food. Some people would call this whole food, and limit those highly processed foods. So I use the 5 ingredient, sometimes 10 ingredient rule as a general guideline. I basically look for items with the shortest ingredient list I can find. So let's talk about potato chips, for example. I would certainly consider potato chips to be a junk food, but I happen to love them. If I'm going to choose to eat potato chips, choosing a brand where the ingredients list contains nothing but potatoes, oil, and salt If you're very astute, you've noticed that that is sugar, fat, and salt all in one tasty little treat, probably why I love them so much. But if I'm choosing a potato chip that has only 3 ingredients, that is going to be a much better option than the brand that has a 15 to 20 ingredient list, many of those ingredients that I can't even pronounce. So the simpler the ingredient list, the better the option. Next is to include fruits and vegetables daily. I know you've probably certainly all heard this one before. If you're already doing this, then the next step would be to increase the portion size or the frequency that you're eating those foods. You simply cannot have too many fruits or vegetables. If you're someone who doesn't really enjoy most vegetables, start with fruit and the few vegetables that you do enjoy. Focus on eating those foods more often first. If you don't like Brussels sprouts, don't force yourself to eat them. If you don't like broccoli raw, but you really like broccoli rice casserole, that's a great place to begin. So this is our first nutrition myth around fruits and vegetables. Fresh fruits and vegetables are more nutritious than frozen or canned fruits and vegetables. That's simply just not true. Fresh, frozen, and canned fruits and vegetables have very similar nutrition values in terms of their vitamin, calorie, and fiber content. The biggest difference is that canned vegetables tend to have more sodium and canned fruits tend to have more sugar. But there's a simple way around this. Just drain them. Drain those canned vegetables and rinse them off, and you've gotten rid of the vast majority of the excess sodium. Not all of it, but most of it. And for those canned fruits, again, choose an option that is canned in its own juices versus canned in a heavy syrup. But either way you go, drain them. That's going to help prevent the intake of a lot of that extra sugar. I honestly keep all 3 versions, canned, fresh, and frozen, fruits and vegetables in my house at any given time. And I use them sort of depending on the recipe or the time that I have or what I'm in the mood for. So they can all be part of a healthy diet. The best way to eat fruits and vegetables is however you are most likely to eat them. So next on the list of nutrition basics is eat a variety of foods. I can be a little guilty from time to time where this is concerned. I do most of the grocery shopping and food prep in my house, and I can tend to get in a bit of a rut, just sort of buying the same foods over and over again. But variety is really important for a lot of reasons. One, it prevents boredom, and boredom can increase cravings, and nobody wants that. So having a nice variety will help prevent boredom. But having a big variety also helps ensure you're getting all the vitamins and minerals that you need to combat all those physiological stress responses that we spent the first half of the presentation talking about. If you're like me and you find yourself repeating the same menu every week, I challenge you to try adding or substitute one new food or recipe each week for the next 4 weeks and just see what that's like. You might find a new favorite. So we touched on the next one a little bit when we talked about mindful eating practices, but as often as possible, avoid multitasking while you eat. I know we're all busy, and trust me, I have eaten plenty of meals at my desk, in my car, while I was watching TV, but there are a lot of studies that show when we eat less, we are more satisfied, when we eat mindfully without multitasking, we are more satisfied and we tend to eat less. Plus, I think it's just good self-care and good stress management practice to allow ourselves 15, 30 minutes of a break to fuel our bodies and rest our minds. So if you're someone who tends to eat while you work, I challenge you this week to carve out a 15-minute time slot where you step away from your work, sit somewhere quiet, and just eat a snack or enjoy your favorite beverage before you get back to work. The last one on this slide, I cannot stress enough. You have to hydrate your bodies. Most of us, to our detriment, do not drink nearly enough water. And I'm going to break a little bit more bad news for you. There's just no substitute for water. Our bodies are made up of it, and it's the basic medium that all of our body's chemical reactions take place in. So not being adequately hydrated makes it more difficult for our body to do everything it needs to do to keep us going. So our body's working harder, which is adding to our physical stress. Calculating your water needs is really easy. You simply divide your body weight in pounds by 2, and the result is the number of fluid ounces of water that you should drink per day. So, for example, if you weigh 150 pounds, you divide 150 by 2, that equals 75. So, you should aim for a minimum of 75 ounces of water per day. Keep in mind that we live in a really warm climate here in Florida. So, on days where you're exerting more energy or sweating a lot, you may need to add in some extra water. Although I do recommend ensuring that you're drinking enough water, I also recommend that if you are not currently getting enough, that you gradually increase your intake over several days or weeks. This is going to allow your body time to adjust to the increase in fluid intake, and it's also going to help you identify the best times of day for you to drink your water. That way you're not overly inconvenienced by bathroom breaks, because as your fluid intake goes up, so will your need to go to the restroom. If you don't like water, I know a lot of people say it just doesn't taste good to them. I do have a couple of tips for you. Depending on how you feel about artificial sweeteners, products like Crystal Light or those little Mio water drops flavoring things can be kind of helpful. A more natural option would be to infuse your water with fruits or sometimes vegetables. Simply slice up like citrus fruit is a great example. Orange slices, orange slices, lemon and lime slices all work really well. And just toss them into a pitcher of water and let it sit in the refrigerator overnight. Cucumber slices, berries work, but you could also use apple slices or pineapple, peaches, almost any fruit you like. After it sits overnight, your water is going to taste like that fruit. And so it just gives it a little oomph. So continuing on with nutrition basics, limiting refined or added sugars is really important. Sugar that's found naturally in foods like fruits or potatoes is metabolized through a completely different pathway in our body. And our body uses that kind of sugar a little bit differently. Refined sugar, like that found in baked goods or candies or processed foods and sweetened beverages like soda, is usually stored in our bodies as fat, and it has very inflammatory properties. So if you are dealing with a lot of chronic stress, you're probably going to have some level of systemic inflammation. Most of us do. So then on top of that, a diet really high in sugar kind of exacerbates or worsens that process, that inflammatory process. For most of us, it's almost impossible to completely avoid refined sugar, but being mindful about ingredients on the label will kind of help get you started. So for this, I use the first 3 ingredients. Ingredients are listed on a label in order of the greatest to the least. So the first ingredient, there's the most, and the last ingredient, there's the least. So I try to choose products that do not have sugar listed in the first 3 ingredients. So my next challenge for you is to choose a food that you have at home in your pantry or your refrigerator, something that comes in a package and that you buy regularly. Check out the label. If one of the first 3 ingredients is some form of sugar, and there are multiple forms, it might say sugar, it might say dextrose, it might say a syrup of some kind, like a corn syrup or a high fructose corn syrup. Those are all other words for sugar. So if one of those things falls in the first 3 ingredients, next time you go to the grocery, go to the aisle where you find that product and peruse some of the neighboring products and see if you can find a similar alternative that doesn't have sugar listed in the first 3 ingredients, and give that one a try and see how you like it. The next one isn't necessarily nutrition based, but it goes hand in hand with healthy eating habits, and that is move your body every day. Work your muscles in a way that feels good and is enjoyable to you. Exercise doesn't have to be particularly strenuous or difficult to be effective. If you like running, by all means, get out there and run. I hate to run. You are never going to see me doing that exercise. If you do see me running, you also should run, because something is terribly, terribly wrong, right? I'm never going to do that. But there are lots of ways to move your body. Walk, bike, dance, Pilates, yoga, kayaking, paddleboarding, whatever it is that you enjoy, just do it more frequently. Movement helps to counteract the effects of stress on our bodies. It keeps us strong and helps us maintain muscle and bone mass as we age, which is really important. It helps promote a healthy gut biome, which is really important, and it strengthens our immune system. So if you are eating a really healthy diet, but you're not participating in regularly planned physical activity, you're only getting about half of the equation. The next one is pretty straightforward. Limit your alcohol intake. We all know alcohol is a known carcinogen, but it also negatively impacts appetite and disrupts hormone balance, and it interferes with our sleep. So the next one, again, is not directly related to diet, but getting enough sleep is super important. A lot like water, sleep is something most of us don't get enough of, and it is absolutely essential not only to our health, but to our performance. Our brain is really inefficient at removing metabolic waste while we're awake, so it builds up during the day. And it's not until we go to sleep that our brain can divert energy to sort of cleaning out all the gunk that has built up over the day. So getting adequate and really good quality sleep can have a huge impact on our body and our wellness in general. Not getting enough sleep can have negative impacts on our appetite, our mood, our performance. It disrupts our hormone balance, it depresses our immune system, and just generally negatively impacts our health and wellness. In fact, when I have a new client who's already eating pretty well and exercising pretty regularly, but they're still having trouble meeting their health goals, one of the first things we look at is their sleep hygiene practices. Lastly, avoid any diet or eating pattern that eliminates an entire food group. Unless there is a medical reason to avoid a food like an allergy or a disease state that requires it, your diet will have more nutritional value with a larger variety of foods. So each food group has foods with varying degrees of nutritional quality. And as you learn more and go along, that may be something that you want to pay attention to. But eliminating any one of those food groups is just not the best nutritionally speaking. And it's usually hard to maintain, which brings me to the very end of the list. Avoid any diet or eating pattern that you cannot maintain long term. Again, we're striving for consistency over perfection. So how do you do this? Well, the MyPlate model is one of the models that we use for education. The MyPlate model was created by the USDA to replace the food pyramid, which is what I grew up with. And I would imagine some of you probably grew up with the food pyramid as well. But the MyPlate model I really like because it's simple and it's visual. I can look at any meal and quickly assess if I'm on the right track. So this model basically says that 50% of your meal should be composed of fruits and vegetables. 25% of your meal should consist of lean proteins, and the last 25% of your meal should include some whole grains. Now, not every meal is going to look like this, and that's okay. I generally encourage people to consider where they're at in terms of how they eat compared to this model, and think about where they might be able to make one small change to get themselves a little bit closer. Dinner's a great meal to start with because for most of us, it's our largest and most consistent meal of the day. If you get really excited about MyPlate and you start Googling it, you're going to find that there are lots of iterations and variations on this model. There's the Mediterranean plate and the anti-inflammatory plate, just as a couple of examples. You're going to see models that include dairy and some models that won't. Try not to get bogged down into all of that and focus more on the big picture. More fruits and vegetables, more whole foods, adequate water intake, daily movement, and good sleep habits. So I wanted to show you some examples of what MyPlate might look like in real life. So the picture on the top left there is a broccoli, chicken, and rice casserole. Depending on the proportions in the recipe, this dish could potentially very well fit into that MyPlate model. My grandmother's old school recipe was definitely short on broccoli and much higher on the rice portion, but you can sort of adjust those, right? Add a little bit more broccoli or add some additional vegetables. The recipe that I took this picture from includes additional vegetables like carrots, celery, peppers, and onions to kind of bulk that up. Right below it, there's a picture of what I think is either a chicken salad or a tuna salad sandwich. And again, by adding some diced vegetables into that, or even if you're one of those people who likes fruit in your salads, putting in some apples or some grapes, they've topped it with some greens here. That's one way to take a basic protein-focused sandwich and sort of bulk up the vegetables. If you move to the side, to the right, the bottom right picture is a breakfast. So breakfast is the most challenging one to fit the My Plate model. We don't traditionally think of vegetables as a breakfast food, but here they've paired some sauteed zucchini, squash, onions, carrots, and peppers with eggs and some whole wheat toast. You have a sloppy joe right above that. Sloppy joes are one of my favorite foods, and there's some great vegetarian sloppy joe recipes out there. But if you want to make it with meat, by sneaking in some finely diced vegetables, again, carrots, mushrooms, peppers, onions, celery, these all work well. That's going to kind of bolster it. The easy answer is serving a salad on the side, but I get so sick of hearing salads as the answer to everything. So I try to just sneak a little bit of veggies into every dish I make whenever possible. And then the top right is some stuffed peppers. You could do this recipe vegetarian where you used a grain-based stuffing, or you could use a meat-based stuffing. And again, just cutting up and mixing in some additional veggies to kind of boost the vegetable content. So I do want to talk about supplements a little bit too. The science on this topic is kind of contradictory. And in theory, if you eat a really well-balanced diet, you shouldn't need a supplement. However, the reality is that the agricultural practices in our country often leave a bit to be desired in terms of the nutritional quality of the food that's being raised. So, oops, give me one, sorry about that. Let's go back one. So, if you are going to take a supplement, you want to make sure that you're getting a quality product. Pharmaceuticals, medications, drugs go through a pretty rigorous process for approval. They have to go through like quality and safety and efficacy testing before the FDA will approve them. But dietary supplements don't go through that same process. Instead, they're regulated under a set of rules known as the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, DSHEA. So under DSHEA, the makers of supplement products are supposed to follow what they call good manufacturing processes. And they're also not supposed to make health claims about the supplement unless they have clinical research to back it up. The reality is there's no organization out there that's regularly monitoring any of that. So there's a lot of misleading product labeling in this industry. So to take up the gap left by the FDA and the DSHEA, several independent companies have created certification standards for supplements. The National Sanitation Foundation, the United States Pharmacopoeia, and the Natural Product Association. So I put their logos here. So if you see any one of these logos on a vitamin or a supplement, you'll know that it's at least gone through some other third-party certification process. So I do want to put a disclaimer here that you should always consult with a doctor or pharmacist before you take any type of supplement, whether it's a vitamin or an herbal supplement of any kind. There are prescription drugs and even some over-the-counter medicines that can have harmful or dangerous interactions with certain supplements. So just be sure that you're always talking to your doctor about this. And if you're going to a new doctor, make sure that they know about any vitamins or minerals or herbal supplements that you're taking. When you're considering what kind of supplement to take, a basic multivitamin is a good place to start. Most multivitamins will include the list you see here. And these vitamins and minerals are what I would consider to be the basic minimum. We need them for healthy immune function, as well as cell turnover and growth. We need them for wound healing. They also play an important role in red blood cell formation, bone and muscle health, as well as cognitive function. They can promote sleep and proper bowel function, hormone production, and central nervous system function. And they help foster a healthy metabolism, which helps improve energy. And they also promote heart and brain health. There are a lot of other vitamins and minerals to include, and a multivitamin should have a much longer list. But like I said, this is a good, simple place to start. It's important to keep in mind that a vitamin or a supplement is not going to be enough to correct a poor or an unhealthy diet. Supplements should supplement an already healthy diet. Okay, now let's get into some nutrition myths to just kind of wrap it up. Let's see. First, there are no innately good or bad foods. There's no one food that's going to solve or cause any given problem. So when we avoid putting a moral value on food, we find eating to be a much more enjoyable experience. And I think culturally, we do this a lot. You'll hear people say things like, my grandmother used to say, oh, that dessert was devilishly good. Or you'll hear things called sinfully delightful, or comfort foods, or things like that. So we sort of attach these moral values to foods. We do it all the time, I think, unconsciously as part of our culture. So it becomes something a little bit pervasive in our relationship with food. So this is part of mindful eating too, right? Any thoughts about the food that come up are something that you want to notice. Let's see, the next one is carbs are bad for you. That's not true. Carbs are not bad for you, and they actually don't cause weight gain, which I think is my next one. So I'll just pop it up there. They don't cause weight gain. Carbs are essential for health, and they are your brain's preferred source of energy. So our body cells, our muscles, and all the other parts of our body can metabolize fat and protein and carbohydrates all pretty efficiently for energy. Our brain really can only metabolize carbohydrates or ketones, and it much prefers carbohydrates. So limiting them too dramatically can actually have some negative side effects. Not all carbs are created equal, which is why we encourage limiting refined sugars and the excess calories that come with them. But we want you to enjoy all of those carb-filled healthy foods like fruits and whole grains and even potatoes. And here's a little bonus myth for you. Sweet potatoes are better for you than white potatoes. I hear this one all the time in my practice. And that's just not true. Sweet potatoes, I don't know who their PR guy is, but they have gotten this boost, like they're somehow better. They're just different. They have different vitamins and minerals in them, but both white potatoes and sweet potatoes can absolutely be part of a healthy diet. All right, calories in versus calories out is all that matters with weight loss. And the truth is that calories do matter, but weight loss is infinitely more complicated than that. So focus on increasing the nutritional quality of your diet versus over restricting your calories. That's generally going to be a better way to go. This is a new one that's been out a little bit more recently. Macros matter. So this is running rampant through the nutrition and health feeds on social media. And although macro coaches may lead you to believe that the ratio of macronutrients in your diet is all that matters when it comes to weight loss and overall health, I think this is a really narrow-minded take on nutrition, and it's missing the bigger picture. While tweaking your macros may benefit you depending on your specific goals, the more important factor in any diet is the quality of the foods that you eat. A really old school myth that a lot of us grew up with is that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. In all fairness, this is a bit more true for children. They do need some fuel in the mornings to kind of help them focus and function. But for adults, meal timing and frequency is as individual as we are. Our eating patterns should work with our bodies and with our schedules. So time of day alone is not enough to cause weight gain or weight loss. So the bottom line is diets just don't work. That's just the simple truth of it. Diets by their very nature are temporary. We go on them and we come off them. And health is not achieved in a few weeks of dieting. It's achieved over years of consistent choices. There is no perfect way to eat, and what works for me might not work for you. Our bodies are unique and individual, and that is what I love about the practice of nutrition. It marries science with art. The basic principles of nutrition and health are grounded in evidence-based research. And that body of research continues to grow and evolve. So the art is helping each individual find what works best for them and what will help them navigate through their own health journey. So as a dietitian, I want you all to eat healthy food, but I also want you to enjoy it. And I hope that this presentation has at the very least made you curious about what that means in your life. I've put some helpful links here. If there's anything in the presentation that you want more information on, whether that's My Plate or supplements, intuitive eating, you can find those links here. There's a Bing videos link that will take you to some mindful eating practices that you can do at home if you're interested in trying that. So I'll make sure that I get this presentation out to John so he can distribute it as he sees fit. And then this is how you can contact me if you want more information about my services. You can reach me through my website or you can email me directly. And again, I'll make sure that John has this information so that he can get it out to everybody as needed. And that is all I have. I'm happy to take questions if there's any
You have
time.
to take questions because we've had a lot of them coming in the whole time you're talking. So Tara, going to one, is there such a thing as too much water, drinking too much water?
There is such a thing as drinking too much water. You can actually get what's called water intoxication, but you have to drink an extremely large amount of water. It is a very uncommon thing to happen.
Okay. In working with diabetics, people have heard that pasta, rice, carbohydrates are bad for diabetics. How do you handle that? Or is this another myth?
I would say it's another myth. Yeah, it's not that carbohydrates are bad for diabetics. I myself have diabetes, actually, and I'm a carboholic for sure. It's not that carbs are bad for diabetics. It's that carbs will have a tendency to spike our blood sugar. So there's a couple of ways to manage this. One, it's about how you pair your carbohydrates with other foods like proteins and fats. For someone with type 2 diabetes who's not taking insulin with their meals, that's what I would work with them on, is how the composition of their overall meal. And sometimes timing with exercise can be important. For someone who, like me, who has type 1 diabetes and is insulin dependent, it's really just about dosing your insulin properly.
Okay. What about intermittent fasting? Have you seen benefits or generalizations with people benefiting from it, using that in your practice?
I have actually. So there's a lot of conflicting research about intermittent fasting right now. In general, intermittent fasting is showing that it has very positive impacts on health in general health and longevity. So one of the most exciting things that I've seen about intermittent fasting is as we age, and I am not a genetic expert by any stretch, this is way above my pay grade, but as we age, our DNA has at the very tip of it something called a telomere. And as we age, those telomeres get shorter and shorter. For people who have spent years intermittently fasting, their telomeres actually get longer after long exposure to intermittent fasting, which they theorize means longer life, right? So there are some definite benefits to it. I don't think it is the panacea of weight loss that people want it to be. And in order to get the benefits, it has to be done correctly. So a lot of people say they're fasting, but they've broken their fast without realizing it because they had their coffee or they took a vitamin in the morning. Anything that you put into your body breaks your fast. So it has to be done very, very specifically.
Does that include black coffee? I've heard friends debating that.
It does include black coffee. The caffeine is going to make it's going to impact your metabolic state and the way that all of that is working. So anything but water breaks the fast.
Okay. One comment here I want to read before I pass it by. For fitness purposes, I wore a continuous blood sugar monitor connected to my phone, and it was very helpful confirming what foods impacted my blood sugar, etc. And see when desire to eat was based on lower blood sugar versus habit or impulse. It was useful learning for a few months. Any comment on that?
Well, I would say I'm glad that it was something that was helpful. I've heard a lot of people have gained knowledge about what is happening with their bodies. I also wear a glucose monitor. Mine is because I really need to know, like at any given time, what my blood sugar is. So it does give you a lot of information about how foods are impacting you. And if you are training, like a lot of endurance athletes, for example, want to know what's happening with their blood sugar because lows and highs can definitely impact stamina. So I think it's something in terms of people without diabetes. There's a lot of exciting stuff kind of in the fitness world coming with that. So yeah,
great.
If you have access to the equipment, I think it's great.
Okay. I'm going to just quickly ask Dan and Carol to look at questions in the chat section because I'm scrolling through the Q&A and we have a lot of comments and questions for you, Tara.
I have one, John.
Okay.
Do you have any advice for nutrition for vegans?
Oh, may I add a corollary to that? My wife's vegetarian.
Sure.
There's always a concern about protein.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a spectrum of vegetarianism, with vegan being the most extreme version of that. No animal products whatsoever. Other forms of vegetarianism may include dairy products or eggs, or I've heard people say they were vegetarian and then watched them eat a bacon sandwich. So there's lots of ways to describe that. So I'm going to speak to veganism in particular. I think that there are some people who do really well with that type of diet, but it takes a lot of additional work, to your point about protein. There are lots of plant sources of protein. The difference between a plant protein and an animal protein is that an animal protein is what we call complete, meaning it has all 9 essential amino acids that our body needs. There are 9 amino acids that our body cannot make on its own. We have to get them from a diet source, and a meat product, an animal product, will contain all 9. Plant proteins generally do not contain all 9, but if you combine your plant proteins correctly, you can get all 9. So following a vegan diet, I think, is something that takes a little additional effort and a little additional knowledge to make sure that you're getting everything in that you need. It is also important to pay very close attention to how you feel after following this diet for a few days or weeks. And I will give you an example from my own personal life. I was not vegan, but I was a pretty strict vegetarian. I was almost vegan with the exception of butter, because I grew up in Texas and I can't not have butter in my life. So that was the only animal product that I was including. And I did pretty well. Like, I felt pretty good. My energy levels were high. And I said to my husband, you've been complaining about this and that and the other thing. That's it. This whole house is going to be vegetarian. We're all going to do it. So my husband followed the same diet I did for about 6 weeks. And one day I came home and he was sitting on the couch watching TV, and I looked at him and I thought, my gosh, he does not look good at all. He looked drawn. He looked tired. He looked like he didn't feel good. And I said, babe, what's going on? And he said, I'm just, I've been so tired the last few weeks. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's not getting enough protein. Like, I get this man a burger, right? Like, let's make a filet for dinner tonight. And as soon as we put meat products back into his diet, he livened right back up. So it wasn't a good fit for him. It worked really well for me. So I think it's important to listen to your body anytime you're trying something like that.
Hey, Tara,
And a supplement is probably going to be helpful for some of those vitamins that are a little more hard to find if you're not including animal products.
right. Tara, I've spotted two other subject matters and questions. I'd like to just give them both to you in the interest of time. What has the experience been in transitioning gluten intolerant people to gluten-free diets? How have they described the effects of doing this? Are there popular food sensitivity tests sold online that are reliable? Another one has to do with your supplement discussion. Regarding supplements, specifically folate, what are your thoughts on taking methylfolate instead?
Okay. I will start by saying that I think that you have to be very careful with those mail order food sensitivity tests. Sometimes they will show sensitivity to a food that you eat regularly, even though you may not be sensitive to it. So what I find when people take these tests is that they end up cutting out a dramatic amount of foods from their diet that ultimately end up getting added back in for quality of life purposes. If you truly have a food allergy or a gluten allergy or sensitivity, the best way to find that out is by seeing a doctor. So an allergist will be able to do either a skin prick test or a blood test to help you determine any foods that you're allergic to. There's a blood test that's required for gluten intolerance or celiac. So if those come back positive and you remove gluten from your diet, I have a wheat allergy. I don't have celiac, but I'm allergic to wheat. So I didn't know that for about 10 years. And when I removed wheat from my diet, the person you see here is completely different. Like, I feel so much better. I don't have the same GI discomfort that I used to have. And I would say most people who have a gluten intolerance or an allergy like that, when they remove that food, they feel better. They'll see their skin clear up, their hair will look better, just everything functions better. And then the other question was about folate. And I think, again, that's probably a more in-depth conversation. In order to answer that, yes or no, I would need more information from the person.
Fair enough. Thanks.
I want to ask one question, drawing on your expertise with diabetic care. As diabetics, are we to find a nutritional plan that can rid us of the need for insulin?
So if you're talking about type 1 diabetes, which is generally diagnosed in people we think of it as a childhood disease. Adults can be diagnosed with it, but we think of it as a childhood disease. It's an autoimmune condition in where your immune system attacks the insulin producing cells in your pancreas so that they no longer function. So for someone like me with type 1 diabetes, there is no food or diet that I can follow that's going to fix my need for insulin. I will always have to take insulin. For someone who has type 2 diabetes, which I wish they both weren't called diabetes. If I ruled the world, I would call one diabetes and I would call one something different, because they're actually very different disease states. But if we're talking about someone with type 2 diabetes, in some cases, it is possible to prevent that person from either needing insulin, or if they're already taking insulin, it is possible with diet and lifestyle in some cases to remove the need for insulin in those patients.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on about 2:10. I think we better cut the questions now. Sorry about that. A lot of great questions in the chat. I'm going to copy these questions and send them to Tara. Also, I would encourage people to reach out to Tara directly. I know a couple of people have worked with her for for athletics, fitness, and performance. Professional athlete. I've known people who work now with weight control, and people with just mood and better habits and better daily function. So it's been really fascinating getting to know you, Tara, and working through these things with you. So fabulous. We have all our presenters' contact info available if anybody ever wants it. Thank you very much, Tara.
Thank you so much. You guys have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks. And I think we're going to take a 5-minute break right now, just so people can get up and stretch their legs a little bit and come back. We will start at 2:15 if that's okay. My clock is showing 2:09.